Hello, once again. We are going back into history through video games. Once again in War Thunder. Today we are going to explore one vehicle in particular. I find this one kind of fascinating. And we're going to go to it's an Air Force from the Second World War that did not get a whole lot of attention. But they tried to carry their own weight as best as they possibly could. It was the Italian Air Force. These guys had not the greatest aircraft, and they really didn't last too terribly long throughout the Second World War, but they tried to keep up as best as they could and throw in whatever weight they could with the aircraft that they had. So the aircraft that we're going to explore within War Thunder here is listed with them as the S.81. Now, if you actually search this online, you'll find out it is labeled wrong. It is actually the SM.81 and I'm going to butcher the name of the manufacturer, is the Savoia Marchetti, is the manufacturer that made that SM.81. It was like a lot of early bombers in World War II. It was based on a commercial airliner first. It was a three-engine airliner, so it kind of gives it a unique look within the Second World War picture. There were not a whole lot of three-engined aircraft in general, let alone in bombers. This thing pulled double duty. It was a transport. It was a bomber. So I'm going to jump into it here and see if I can get a battle loaded up. It is going to be the only aircraft I will film and talk about from this one. I may get a few other aircraft up and see if I can record that for another video. But that's going to be the focus of this video today. So super quick overview. There's really not a whole lot of history written about this in general, other than it was a good step forward for the Italian military. This aircraft was kind of the first heavy bomber that the Italians had in the Second World War. It did torpedo bombing as well, and it did initially served during the Spanish Civil War. That was kind of when it first saw combat, similar to the Ju-87 for the Germans. And so this aircraft first flew as a bomber in 1935, but it was based on a plane already in service with civilian airliners. So it didn't really have to be developed too terribly much. They kind of knew the premise of what they were looking for. When you look at the Second World War and the aircraft that were available during this time, this one kind of stands out because it was wooden wings. It was a fairly old construction, kind of an antiquated construction that you didn't see too terribly much throughout the Second World War development. That was going to be the war that we saw a lot of technologies being included for not just aircraft development, but also tanks and ships and everything. But this was especially going from the pre-war aircraft to what was being flown at the end of the war. You saw a lot of canvas planes being phased out, looking at you, swordfish, and a lot of those wooden superstructures being replaced by lighter metal structures or more durable metal structures, and actually having armor within the plane and trying to look out for the occupants of those planes. So there was a lot of steps forward that were made on the technology side for the Second World War, just in general. So the SM-81, it was like I said earlier, tri-engined bomber, and I'm going to rotate around here. You can see all those up there. The thing that the Italian Air Force also did was they left in all these windows along the side, simply because they could then move it from bombing operations to transport operations, give passengers kind of a look out the window kind of thing. But it would actually throw off some of the attackers during daylight hours if they were following this when it was a bomber configuration. If those bombs were up in the bay, you couldn't actually see them, and they saw the windows. And most bombers through the Second World War did not have windows on them, other than your kind of gun stations, like your waist gunners. So having windows on a bomber actually was a passive way of protecting it If the fighters were looking closer, they could kind of tell what was going on. But just from a glance, if they looked and they saw that it was in that transport mode, they may not attack it as willingly, or be worried about, if you're shooting down a transport full of people versus, a military aircraft that's looking to destroy some targets. There is going to be some hesitation there. So the other interesting thing that you kind of see a lot of the interwar and early war aircraft, bombers specifically, but a lot of aircraft, is it had fixed undercarriage here. So those wheels did not retract. It was in that tricycle, kind of backwards tricycle layout. It was just a very popular way for your landing gear to be fixed. It made it so that there was less moving parts, but it then increased drag and everything for the aircraft. So it made it a little bit slower. It made it pretty kind of slow response in the air, but it would ease kind of the amount of moving parts that the pilots had to worry about while they were actually in the air and flying. So we are now focusing on these boats. See what we could take out here. Got a few more. So I do kind of favor the bombers, like I was saying in one of my earlier videos in this game, simply because I am on a controller. But when you compare bombers one to another, it really doesn't handle too terribly bad compared to any other bombers from any other nations. Even though it is supposed to be a bomber that is, from pre-war, designed as that airliner, they adapted it very well for the controls that you kind of have for this aircraft in this game. It doesn't feel like you're flying around a big old bus or anything like that. The amount of guns that they slapped into this aircraft for protection is actually pretty outstanding. It had, and I'm going to look this one up, so it actually had retractable turrets. Of course, in the game you don't get to retract them, but they are sitting, that one up top there, I believe, was retractable, and the one below is a little retractable. The bomb bays, and I'm going to hit it here, you can see that they just released straight out. Actually, we're going to release the rest of those so I can get that reloaded. So the bombs were all stored vertically. If you saw that, it just dropped straight out. Typically, the American bombers, and I believe British and German bombers, stored those bombs in a horizontal alignment. Just that was the way that they wanted to go as far as storing those. The Italians just figured, you know what, flip it. You can fit more vertically, and you just kind of start launching them from the front to the back. It almost looks like a submarine's missile launching system nowadays. But that was how the Italians had their bomb bay set up. One last thing that I want to touch on, because it looks like we might be running out of time here. The other team is kind of kicking butt. But the other thing I want to touch on is the propulsion for this aircraft. They had those 3 engines up front. Typically, planes would stick with one kind of engine manufacturer, and they would stick with, if it was working for them, they wouldn't fix what isn't broken kind of principle. The Italians, however, kind of spread the wealth around with their 3 engines. It had a wide range of engines throughout its service career. Notably, Alfa Romeo, the car company that we all know for its high-end cars today, it actually made 2 of the engines that were used on this aircraft over its service career. And those engines would put out up to looking like 1,000 horsepower per engine. So you're looking at about 3,000, sorry, horses at the front of this front of that vehicle. So that's a super quick overview of the SM.81, one of Italy's. I mean, Italy was kind of an underrated factor of itself, but one of those underrated aircraft within an underrated air force. Just something to explore to show that, they may have been behind a technological curve, but they were still putting out good aircraft. I haven't seen if there are any surviving airframes still flying for this. I would love to see if there are. It looks like that the last operational aircraft was retired 1950, and they served in several different air forces. Looks like China, Italy, of course, and Spain, Spanish Air Force during the Spanish Civil War. But they produced well over 500 of these aircraft. They were used very effectively, or attempted to use very effectively throughout its service career. So just super quick overview for you guys. I'm going to keep exploring different aircraft I can within this game. I am looking to see if I can get into Assassin's Creed later this week and see if I can do some exploring in there, find some history in there that maybe wasn't as well explored within the game itself. I know in those earlier games for Assassin's Creed, they actually popped up some good information. In later games, you kind of have to dig for that information within it. So we'll see what we can get figured out there. If you guys have any suggestions of games you would love for me to explore or look into, see if I can dig up some history within those games. If I've got them, I am more than willing to jump into them. I'm always looking for an excuse to go back in my library and figure out what games I can get into. If it's a game I don't have yet, be patient with me. I'll see if I can get the game when the funds become available for me. I got to budget myself on my fund money, otherwise the dogs won't get fed. I won't get fed. Just gotta be careful on that one. So drop a like, drop a comment. Let me know what you guys think. Subscribe if you are so inclined, and we will see y'all later.